You're listening to the SBA Loan Experts Podcast, your source for information, tips, and education on the SBA loan program from SBA expert Chris Hearn, founder and CEO of Fountainhead, the nation's leading non-bank SBA lender. Here's your host, Chris Hearn.
Yeah, we've had a few borrowers that died. We've had a few that have filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. We're right at about 80% of all of our PPP loans having been submitted for forgiveness, and obviously the vast majority of it, probably 99% of those who submitted, have gotten complete forgiveness. The other 1% have partial forgiveness. But to give you some perspective, I mean, we've been sending out emails to our borrowers for the last, it's February. We've probably been sending them out for 5 or 6 months now, 3 emails a week. And for the last 2.5 months, we've been sending out 2 text messages a week. And I'm pretty sure no other lender out there has been as aggressive in terms of, advocating for their borrowers to go to the portal and submit for forgiveness. So the fact is we're at about 80%. My guess is we'll get to about 90% by, June or July. And then that last 10%, 29, 30,000, could be as much as 40,000 of our loans, we're going to have to be submitting for guarantee purchase. So I just don't think anybody quite could anticipate these things. You can project all you want, but until you're in the middle of it, you have no idea. So to your question about fraud, how much of it is fraud? My gut tells me there's a chunk of it that's definitely fraud. And of course, the funny thing about all this is you got to scratch your head and go, well, if it was fraudulent on the front side, right? They doctored their tax documents or, whatever they did, or, ID theft or stuff like that. You would think, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but you would think a smart criminal would complete the crime, right? On the backside, they'd submit for forgiveness.
Right, if they got in.
Yeah.
And people think they're legitimate, why not just submit and say, I paid salaries only?
That's right.
And here it is.
That's right. But I think, if you're a criminal and you committed fraud, I suppose it's not, a reach to presume that those folks, they just don't care. And they didn't care that law enforcement was going to go after them on the front side, so why would they think law enforcement is going to go after them on the back side? But the reality is it very well may happen. But yeah, it's kind of a silly situation, and I'm sure there's other situations where maybe a borrower submitted all their information, and they're one letter off on their email, or they're 1 digit off on their cell phone number. There could be stuff like that, which is why actually we're about to do a sequence of direct mail pieces as well, and see if that helps. And we'll probably put like a QR code so they can scan it. Particularly for the under 150, SBA's made it pretty easy. I mean, it's like a 5-minute process to actually submit for forgiveness if you're under the 150 mark. So, but yeah, so it could be any of these things. You just never know, and it's such a fluid situation as you've been writing about for the last 2 years. I mean, it's just remarkable. I think we could project all sorts of things, but you don't really know until you're in the middle of it. There's situations like we had a situation a couple days ago. We have a borrower who has like a $15,000 PPP loan, but he's been and his deferment period just ended, and he's been non-responsive until we sent out the first payment. And because he was in that initial batch of 2020 vintage PPP loans, the April and May and a couple of days into June of 2020, so they all had 2-year amortizations on them. Well, you have to subtract the deferment period out of the amortization. So in his case, he's only got, whatever, 8 months or something to pay back a $15,000 loan. If you do the math, I mean, it's a huge monthly payment for him. So of course, he's asked us if we can modify it, and we will. We'll go out to the 5-year term, the max that we can. Less is the deferment period. But I mean, there's a number of situations like that where these borrowers, if they don't get full forgiveness, they're cramped in terms of what they owe back, and have a relatively short period to pay them back. At least the 2020 stuff, unless they were after June 5th of 2020. Yeah.
Right, which is when the amortization went from 2 years to 5 years.
That's right. That's correct.
Okay.
So I know this is a lot to chew on, but
well, no, I appreciate it. It's a big deal, and I know you're going to be working on some things later. But I'm definitely interested, and we're definitely going to end up writing something. And as always, I appreciate you bringing stuff like this to my attention, because sometimes you have to be deep in the weeds to see the problems.
Yes. That's exactly right. Yeah, and you've probably written more PPP stories than I think just about any reporter out there. So that's why I thought of you first, and frankly, that one sentence was what piqued my interest. I'm like, well, by the way, how did you come up?
I asked SBA.
Who told you that?
Yeah.
Okay.
They said so far less than 1%. But my thinking is, as you talked about it, this is only something that if lenders are just getting towards, of course it would be a lower
That's
percentage
right.
at the beginning, especially because you're going to want to give it all the time you can and hope that there's a fix before you start, as you said, maybe hiring staff. So I bet you that's going to grow. But it's definitely not something that they include in the public numbers.
No, right. Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the earliest PPP loan was made in April of 2020. So move ahead 12 months here to April 21. So that's a year. Add 4 more months, May, June, July, August. So you're at August of 21. And then add your 2 more months, so September, October, plus your 10 days. So the first time that anybody could submit for guaranteed purchase was mid-November of last year. So, we were only at, what would that be? We're only at 60 days into what would be eligible for guaranteed purchase. And, that first round, that first, whatever it was, 13 days before they ran out of money, I'm talking, this is like the early part of April of 2020. A lot of those loans were the well-established employer firms. Presumably they have, a controller or a CFO, and, they got tons and tons of record keeping. So most of those, I would guess, would be fully forgiven if people used the proceeds as they were supposed to. Meaning, I don't think there would be as many guaranteed purchases from that initial batch in April or May or June of 2020. Well, I shouldn't say that. Once they replenished the funds toward the end of April, I think a lot of lenders went further down market. They didn't just take care of their most important large customers. They started, dealing with smaller businesses. But yeah, and by the way, again, so we're only like 60 days into the possible guaranteed purchase period. Well, again, extrapolate it out. So then you go, the only loans that were made in 2020 were made from April through August. So if you continue to add the 16 months of deferment plus the 2 months, first 2 months, plus the 10 days, I mean, there's going to be a lull here, pretty much starting about now or next month, and then the real stuff hits again, like I said, probably August and through the remainder of the year.
Today's episode is brought to you by Fountainhead, the nation's leading non-bank SBA lender. Fountainhead's team of SBA experts will guide you through every step of the process and get your loan closed faster and more efficient than any bank. Apply today online at FountainheadCC.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the SBA Loan Experts Podcast.